Hello lovely people, how are you all doing? I hope you are well, I hope you're happy, hope you're cozy, hope you're enjoying some marvellous reading at the moment. I've got only two books today, more of that in a second, but yeah, two very interesting, very good books, we'll come on to them. But there are only two today, and that's because we're starting to warm up. I know, how do the two things correlate? When I say warm up, it's still winter, obviously, but no scarf, no gloves today. There's been a bit of sunshine on my south-facing window, and that's enough to raise the temperature in here to a balmy 18 degrees centigrade. Oh my goodness, it's not been that for ages. The reason I'm mentioning the fact that it's warming up, also our days are just starting to get a bit longer. I was out the other afternoon and it was about 10 to 5 and I suddenly thought, oh, it's still light. And I'm not turning lights on indoors till easily gone 4. So long as it's a bright day. We have had some really dark, cloudy, gloomy days. But anyway, yeah, it's warming up. The days are getting longer and I'm still very much in tune with it's the growing year thing, isn't it? For me, reading has always been a winter pastime when the garden is basically quiet, it's seeing to itself. All I do with the garden over winter is go down and do a bit of harvesting. And actually I really need to get on with a few jobs because I've got too much in the habit of reading and not gardening. That's not to say I read during the daytime, I don't. Reading is a nighttime activity. But even so, it's just part of my rhythm every year that once we get into November, my working day is shorter, let's put it that way. And so, by 10 o'clock in the evening, I'm happy to curl up with a book. Brilliant. So yeah, the books are going to start, well, as you can say, they're going to start trailing off. There are usually 1 or 2 books every month, even through the height of the growing season. But yes, anyway, more of that as the year progresses, but there's all sorts of archive clips that I'm going to be looking at and bringing you in any case. So at the moment, that sort of all getting back into that feeling of the garden and the timing and less reading. It's not so much about the garden, but it's more about the flat and getting it ready for putting it on the market, and it just becomes incredibly time consuming. And there have been quite a few evenings where I've just flopped and I haven't bothered reading, but these two I have. So I've mentioned in the past in terms of books that I tend to have a sort of a theme runs through things. So when I've finished one book, I usually know which book I'm going to read next, because something about the next book, it sort of follows from the previous. And then every now and again I have a break completely of 3 or 4 days, and the next book I pick up has got nothing to do with what I've just read. But these two are sort of connected. So today's books are, and I'm going to have to read his name, Richard Wagamese's Indian Horse and Robin Wall Kimmerer's Gathering Moss. Canadian, American. The reason they're connected, sort of loosely connected, is because they are both Indigenous people in those countries. So Richard Wagamese, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but he is a First Nations man. Robin Wall Kimmerer, she is a native North American. And I had a feeling that there might... One of the reasons I've really enjoyed Robin Wall Kimmerer in the past is in the books there's that connection to sort of land and living creatures and nature, and that sort of right from sort of creation myth to everyday living, how they live within the landscape and how they are sort of custodians. So I thought, oh, these two might be interesting to read together. So let's start with Richard Wagamese's Indian Horse. You see there's some skaters on the front. First and foremost, it's not a long book. It's just over 220 pages. So beautiful. This is a really difficult book. There's no two ways about it. Not difficult because of the language, difficult because of the subject matter, emotionally, mentally difficult. It's not a subject I profess to know a great deal about, not by any means. I know very little. But through having a couple of Canadian friends and stuff that was coming out in the news in Canada sort of 2 or 3 years ago, and a friend of mine was posting articles online that I could read online. So I got a little bit of an introductory education to the subject from her over the last couple of years. One of the central parts of this book is the residential schools. So for anyone outside of Canada, anyone who doesn't know about the residential schools, these were schools, we say it in inverted commas, it was more like Borstal, where young First Nations, I mean, he calls himself an Indian, so rather than me keep saying First Nations person, mouthful, young Indian children were taken from their family, taken from their band or their tribe, forcibly taken and put into these schools to basically have the Indian pretty much beaten out of them. The idea was that all these children would be forced to learn and speak and write and read in English, so they would forget their own language. Culturally, everything would become English. It's obviously we have hindsight now, and we find the very notion of this utterly abhorrent. I'm not going to sit in judgment on anyone. This is something from the past. Let's learn from it. But because that's the central part of this book, I can't not talk about it. So he's sort of talking about it from the point of view of the 1960s. It really is hard to read because of that. And even though we know that right now there's so much work being done in terms of sort of, reconciliation, it's still hard to know that even though this is a work of fiction, how much it's based on his own experience. He has a lovely face. Let me show you his face there. Oh, lovely. There's something so gentle about it. So just from the outset, it's a difficult subject to read about, and there are some parts of it which I found truly awful in terms of, there were parts which made my blood boil and made me so angry. There are other parts which just made me just sob uncontrollably. So yeah, it's difficult, it's emotional. The whole book, buckle in. Look, I think this is an absolutely fantastic book, beautifully written, absolutely gorgeously written. Everyone should read it, but it is not for the faint of heart. Like I say, buckle in, because we have that expression, oh, it's an emotional roller coaster. Wow, that couldn't be more true than for this book, because right from the outset, it's like there's a sense of, throughout the whole book, almost in every sentence, there's a sense of foreboding. With the school, so at the beginning when he's not in the school, we kind of know from the flyleaf, we know he's going to end up in one of these schools. What on earth is it going to do to him? So there's that sense of foreboding all the time. But he still manages to sort of lift us up. Oh, something's happening. Oh, they're going to their lake. It's their lake. And oh, it's lovely. And oh, look, it's, plentiful hunting ground. They're gonna, hunt and eat well, and then oh no, something awful happens and we start coming down again, and then oh, he's climbing out of it, he's finding something that he can hang on to and, you know, keep his humanity with this thing, and then oh no. So it is up and down the whole way through. And I will say right at the end, thank goodness there is hope right at the end, because otherwise I think it would be too difficult to read, certainly for me. As I mentioned right at the beginning with the Robin Wall Kimmerer, one of the things that interests me and attracts me to these kind of books written by native First Nations people, native North Americans, is the sort of the magic in their world. Let's call it magic from Western eyes. It's hard to, I don't want to offend anyone with the wrong nomenclature or you know, misappropriation of words, anything like that. But yeah, that sense of magic and wonder in the natural world, and how we're all part of it and we all possess that, and we all have our special gift. Everything has its special gift to give. Actually, that comes up in the Robin Wall Kimmerer. But yeah, we all, as a human, what is my special gift to give? This plant, what is its special gift to give? It might be that plant's special gift is it has healing properties for, you know, a stomach problem. It might be that its gift to give is that it can be braided and used for making baskets. It might be that it can be turned into a bowl. Whatever it is, everything has its special gift to give. Love that. Really, really love that. So at the start of this book, he's with his family. I was going to say all is well, but one sense is all is not well. But at the beginning of the book, we get some of that. We get some of his culture. We get some of that magic and the myth, and it's gorgeous. But it isn't too long before he's taken. And I won't tell you the circumstances under which he's taken. You'll have to read it yourself, but have a handkerchief. So he's taken and he's put into one of these residential schools. Vile, obviously. And while he's there, it's always about, like, how can I pique your interest without giving things away? While he is there, he gets involved with ice hockey. So this is a book, it's kind of about ice hockey. Of course it's not about ice hockey. Ice hockey is the metaphor. And rather like when I was talking about Boys in the Boat. Gosh, I had to remember it then. The Boys in the Boat. You don't have to be a rowing expert to enjoy Boys in the Boat. You don't even have had to ever watched a rowing race in your life to enjoy Boys in the Boat. Likewise, if you know nothing about ice hockey, you can still enjoy it. I mean, I know very little. Ice hockey in the UK, I think ice hockey is to Canadians what footy is to Brits. It's your national sport, isn't it, pretty much? So in the UK, we do have a few ice hockey teams. They're few and far between. We don't really have many ice rinks. You know, it's not like you don't get an ice rink in every town. So for a lot of people like me, our only experience of ice hockey is when we watch it at the Winter Olympics, and it's mad. It's mad, just like smashing people into the boards. Oh my goodness. I can never see the puck. I can never see the blooming puck. How do they see it? Anyway, so he finds ice hockey at this school, and ice hockey sort of becomes his saviour. It allows him to get out of the school when they go and visit other places. But of course, one of the huge themes one of the biggest parts of this book is racism. Of course it is. And that's really, I nearly swore then, that's really blooming hard to read. I get upset even thinking about it. So when they go, you know, it's like, oh, you can only play with other Indians. But yeah, ice hockey becomes this saviour, and it turns out, you know, he's quite good at it. And this is where we come back to this this kind of First Nations myth, and we all have a gift, and what is our gift to give, and how, but also that idea of we are just one part of everything else. We're not better than, we don't lord it over, we don't own the animals and the plants, we don't lord it over them, we are just another thing like they are things. And if we open ourselves up to the magic, to being at one within all of these things, and he finds a way to channel that part of himself, that part of his culture that had it was in danger of being lost, but somehow when he's on the ice hockey, is it called a pitch? Can't be a pitch, that's field hockey. Ice hockey rink? I've forgotten already what you actually call the ice that you play on the rink. He's able to channel this gift, this spirit that's inside him, and it makes him pretty blooming good. It's so good, in fact, that ought to be his way out of sort of poverty and misery and the way out of the school, etc., etc. And it almost is, except for the fact that he's a native lad. And because of that, he's always going to be suppressed because of racism. So it makes it tough. And he goes on to have... So the book covers his life from about the age of 7 until... I think he's just approaching 30 towards the end. It is... I'm getting upset thinking about it. It's a tough book. It's an emotional roller coaster. But within it just kept being beautiful. I just kept finding little moments of beauty. Although I hardly made any notes when I was reading because I was in it. But one of the things I did make a note of, I said, the never-ending hate breaks him. He's barely 18. He's pretty much still a boy, but he's utterly broken. He's bitter and he's angry, and that means he's going to go on and do some pretty dumb stuff. So, I think it's really cleverly constructed, that it's really cleverly written, because just as a reader, just when I was getting utterly hopeless with it, something will come along that, it just lifts us up again. It just holds us up. And like I said, right at the end, when he's in his community, you kind of feel that you can breathe again. He's safe. Okay, he's going to be safe. Gorgeous, stunning book, amazing writer. Richard Wagamese, even before I was halfway through, I was looking at this author up. I was like, right, I want to read everything because it's so lovely. And I was reading The Flyleaf, and it's talking about other best-selling books of his. There's one called One Native Life, one story, one song, and then it said, and his final book, Embers. I read final book, I thought, no, is he dead? He's dead. 45, 55, 60. So he was young. He died young at the age of 62. How much of this book is autobiographical, I wonder? And when I saw that he died at the age of 62, I thought, well, if this is part of his life, I'm not surprised he died young. It's too tough. It's too tough for anyone. Please read it. Give it a go. If you can find it. I don't know how easy it will be to find outside of Canada. It was the 2013 Canada Reads selection. Published, it must have been published sometime. Oh, sorry, I should have said as well, this came from this. I had this for Christmas from Susan. She's in Ottawa, Ontario. Sorry, this was published in 2012. So it's a fairly recent book. I don't know if you're going to be able to find it outside of Canada. Have a look though. Please give it a read. It's only short. I think it's one of those books that's really, really important. I think it's just important that we all have an awareness of other people and other things that have happened in life. And I mentioning it recently about how one of the things that books teach us, we learn all sorts from books. We learned about ice skating. But I think one of the biggest things that books can teach us, if we're open, books can teach us empathy. And when we read a story like this, whether it's partly biographical, whether it's completely fiction, but it's based on, history, let's have empathy and understanding, and let's not have the kind of hate that leads to a young boy becoming utterly broken and bitter. Important book. Getting a bit emotional. Right, now on to something completely different, but staying with, like I said, a Native American woman, Robin Wall Kimmerer, she of Braiding Sweet Grass, which I've spoken of many, many times. Her book, Gathering Moss. Again, a really little book. I'll do it that side because my page is scuffed. Dinky little book. 170 pages. Now you might think 170 pages on moss. Are you kidding? What? And I kind of thought that too. In much the same way that when I read Sproutlands, the book about tree pollarding and coppicing, I thought, chunky great, but you can't write forever on that subject. Well, you can. Oh, what a glorious read. What a glorious read. And you know what? It was the perfect book to read after Indian Horse because it's so uplifting, but some of that, the spirit, the myth, the creativity, it's in here too. So Robin Wall Kimmerer, by day, she also teaches. So she's a Native American woman. She is a scientist, a botanist, so she comes at things with that wonderful dual kind of vision of science and botany, but also her own culture and myth, and also, just all those, the other names for plants and animals and their uses and their place within our created universe. Wonderful. So she teaches at university. She's a professor. And you can tell that she's brilliant. She's teaching us all the way through this book. None of it is ever patronising. I was going to say, it's like, at times I felt like I was at primary school again, and she's my teacher, and she's leading me by the hand through a forest or through a rocky canyon to look at all the mosses on the rocks. I felt like I was being led, and maybe that feeling of being like a 6-year-old being led through the forest by a teacher to be shown things is because that kind of awe and wonder and enthusiasm we experience when we're 7. I felt that now as an adult. The teaching is so clear, but it's never patronising. At times I felt like, yes, I'm in a science lesson. At other times I felt like I was reading a fairy tale. It's wonderful. Throughout, and this is what I love about her work as well, she dots all sorts of little personal stories. And it helps to make the book engaging rather than just a dry book, science book on moss. But also some of it will be, she'll engage us in a story about walking in a bog as an introduction to a chapter on bog mosses, for example. But there are also little moments, very personal little moments dotted in, like there's a moment when she's going to meet her daughter. Her daughter's away at university. She's going to pick her up at the station, or probably the airport. And she suddenly has this longing, this deep yearning longing for her daughter to be a little girl again, so that she can put mommy's pinny on and they can do cookies together. And I loved those little moments dropped in because I don't know whether it's intentional or not, but it sort of reminded me of the minutiae of all of our lives. You think of those minute moments every day that we remember because they're special, like that moment of making cookies with your daughter. And if you think in one day across the entire globe, how many minute moments are happening, and in a lifetime, how many minute moments happen, and that just my lifetime alone, how many minute moments, and then the lifetime of everyone on the planet, so you get the idea. There's all these minute moments happening, and it sort of, I thought that's perfect for this book about moss, because moss is quite a tiny thing, and more often than not we just walk past, we barely notice it. If it's en masse, we might think, oh, it's beautiful verdant green, but we never really look really closely, and it deserves to be looked at closely in the same way that some of our minute moments deserve that close attention. They deserve the memory. So rather than seeing all of humankind as just a big green blanket, those moments, let's dive in deeper, let's have a closer look, let's look at that moment of the mum and her little daughter making cookies together and see the beauty in that tiny moment. So I love that. Now that, I don't know whether she did that on purpose or whether it's just how I read it and that's how my mind works, but I loved it. And just saying that now reminds me, there's a sentence right near the beginning that I also loved, and I think, gosh, this is so perfect in our modern, crazy, busy world, isn't it? She says, mosses, she briefly mentions lichens a couple of times, and I want to really start to understand the difference and start looking at them more. But anyway, mosses and other small beings issue an invitation to dwell for a time right at the limits of ordinary perception. All it requires of us is attentiveness. Look in a certain way and a whole new world can be revealed. Oh, love it. Yeah. Ooh, she gets my juices flowing. That kind of the curiosity, the beauty. Honestly, I mean, how can you read a book 170 pages long about moss? But it's really interesting from basic. Oh, look, here we go. There's some diagrams as well. So from some basic science stuff about how they reproduce, I had no idea. It's fascinating. You know, how they colonize. Yeah, it's... this was bought for me. This was a gift. Thank you, Jan, my friend in over in PNW. If I saw this on the shelf, I would probably walk past it. And then I think, oh no, hang on, it's Robin Wall Kimmerer. I might have a look. But moss, do I really want to read a whole book about moss? Read it. 2 books today. Read them both. So I'm going to read this a little tiny bit from the beginning of the chapter the chapter is called The Red Sneaker. I want to pull you into Robin Wall Kimmerer's world and encourage you to give her a look. So, as I dance alone in a sunlit bog, the ground beneath my feet rolls in slow waves. For a long, seasick moment, my foot hangs in mid-air, waiting for a solid place to land. Every step sets off a new undulation, like walking on a waterbed. I reach out to steady myself, grabbing a branch of tamarack, but I've stood too long in one place, and the cold water rises around my ankle. The bog sucks at my foot, and I drag it out with a slow, sucking sound, my leg coated to mid-calf in black muck. I'm glad I left my boots back at the top of the esker. She's walking barefoot. An old red sneaker of mine lies somewhere in these depths, lost on another research trip several years ago. Now I go barefoot. Apart from its proclivity for stealing footwear, A quaking bog is a lovely place to spend an August afternoon. Oh! Does that grab you? It grabs me. I hope it's grabbed you. And so off we go into the bog to look at bog-specific moss. Yeah, there's another whole section. I think it's this video is going to be too long if I read from this bit too. But she's talking about... okay, I'll give you a quick bit. In traditional Indigenous communities, learning takes a form very different from that in the American public education system. Children learn by watching, by listening, and by experience. They are expected to learn from all members of the community, human and non-human. To ask a direct question is often considered rude. Knowledge cannot be taken, it must instead be given. Knowledge is bestowed by a teacher only when the student is ready to receive it. And she goes on to talk about, plant observation and learning through observation. And I loved it, and that's about halfway through the book, but it also it sort of helps us understand who she is as a teacher. She's a professor, but I just get the sense, oh my God, I'd love to do her course. I want to spend time with her out somewhere, looking at moss, looking at anything with her. But it's back to that idea. She talks about it in here, as I was mentioning when I was referring to Indian horse, about what gift does each thing in the universe have to give? Why was that thing created? What does it have to give? And she talks about this with reference to moss, and there's a really beautiful chapter on the gift that moss gives us, because it's not really something we eat, it's not really, but she goes into it, and I'll leave that for those of you who wish to find out for themselves. Quickly, I want to tell you something about the end, but I did scribble quite a few notes, but I wrote to myself, read it slowly. This is a book to read slowly. Each sentence is saturated with beauty, myth, imagery, spirit, love, passion, and soul. It's true. Oh yes, I thought also it felt to me like it's like this, the biggest, grandest, most lavish opera sung in a whisper, because it's tiny. Loved it. She is a really wonderful teacher. Personal moments, yes. Reciprocity. Reciprocity is a theme that comes up often in her writing. Oh yes, just to go back to that idea of gift. What is the gift of moss? What is moss's gift to give? What is a human's gift? And she says a human's gift, the human's role is that of respect and stewardship. So that's the gift we've been given, is to bestow respect on things and stewardship, to look after things. I love that. But right at the end, in the very last chapter, this is where I'm going to get emotional again, goodness me. There is a moment, there's a little moment, it is pure magic. I just hold it in my heart for a moment longer. It's pure magic. I read it and had a little gasp moment. I'm going to keep, for now, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to keep that as my own special secret. But I hope that if you know that something like that is coming at the end of the book, don't go to the last chapter first. That will spoil it. Read the whole book. I hope that will entice you to read it. And when you do, when you get to that moment, excuse me. When you get to that very, very special moment, you'll know it when you get there. Stop. Close your eyes. Just take a moment and whisper, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all this. Thank you for the insects and the birds and the trees and the sky and the sea and stars and sunshine. Thank you. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. All this, all these gifts, because they are all gifts, aren't they? All these gifts are more than enough for any of us. That's all we need. Thank you. And thank you, Robin Wall Kimmerer, for a beautiful, joyous book, but with the most exquisite, magical moment right at the end. I adored it. Whew, right, so yes, that's your 2 for today. Oh, light problems. Very, very different, but they have a commonality which is gorgeous. Both books beautiful, again beautifully written, but my God, it's a tough book to read, really tough book, but so worth it. Please do read it. And then Robin Wall Kimmerer, well, you know what, this woman needs to write a book every single year for the rest of her life to keep me happy. Can you do that, Robin, please? Can we all write to Robin Wall Kimmerer and say, please, Robin, can you write another book? Vivi needs another book. All right, my lovelies, I will leave it there. Hopefully you will find one or the other in your local library. They might be able to get it in for you, borrow from a friend, whatever. But yeah, I hope you give either or both a read, because they are stunning books, both of them. Right, that's enough book chat for now. I will see you all again really soon with something else. Until then, stay well, stay cozy, stay reading. Cheerio.